like to do first of all is to introduce Shane Carter as our first keynote presenter. Shane is an expat Irishman with international experience across many industries. What we're going to get is the opportunity for an outsider, in my language, to give us a bit of a burst, to talk about what the opportunities are, the technologies. One of the things I'm passionate about, a thing called smart sensors. We're talking to a guru on that in Shane, and almost, I think, telling us how we can capture what I would regard as big data and really make a difference on the ground with that information. The company that he's the National Sales and Marketing Manager, and I won't pronounce this right, but Ziargus, and he'll fix me up when I get up here with that pronunciation. I think it's supposed to be Ziargus. Are experts in system integration, process control, automation, information technology across mining, food and beverage, manufacturing, pharmaceutical industries. They're leaders in problem solving, tracking inventory, through to automotive processing chain, to ensuring product integrity in a range of things, including things like our milk factories. So Shane Carter, look forward to a challenging presentation to kick us off this morning. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's Ziargus, Jason. The topic I'm going to talk about this morning is a very detailed topic. What I've tried to do in the short time frame with the presentation is to give you really some highlights about, where are we? Obviously, our background's from the industrial sector. We have, for the last number of years, been moving in and looking at systems in the agricultural sector. So really it's saying, what information is there now? How is it captured? So let me just, Houston, we have a problem. Whoop. So just to give you a quick overview, we'll look at legacy systems. So what do you have in your farms now? What information do you use and utilize on a daily basis? What latent information is there that you may not know is there? IoT and IoET, these are the new buzzwords of this generation. And that's the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything, and how it applies to farming as it does to industry, as it does to our day-to-day lives. Smart sensor technology, we'll have a quick and a brief look. So what's in the market now? What are the trends? What's in development? And what are we likely to see in the next short space of time? A concept we've been looking at for a while, the digital farm. So how to take existing farming properties and how to recover and capture that data. It's not just a data recovery exercise, it's how can we get useful information and how can it be applied to help people like yourself make informed decisions. Some of the specific applications, things like Lambda assignment, data capture, modernizing it, smart sensors today, custom application, and MEMS. We'll get to MEMS in a while. So, if we look at a legacy system, so we look at, most farms, anything electronic, be it from your weighing system or your weigh scales, will typically have communication standards that are pretty much industry standards. RS-232, so that's a little 9-pin plug. So you'll find most modern weighing systems will have that protocol. It sits there resident on quite a lot of equipment, and nobody actually takes the data off. They walk up with a pad and a piece of paper, look at a scale reading, write it down. So one of the challenges we've looked at, and we've looked at a number of projects in agriculture that we've been involved in over the last 2 years, is how can we deploy existing technology? So what can we add to that technology chain now that makes the gathering of that information a lot easier? So again, what it's all about, if you take a farm, you say, okay, what information is here? I've got an electric fence somewhere. I've got silos with levels in them. I've got a dam with a level in it. How can I get that information easily and in electronic format back to something or a device that gives me an overall view of the farm. What's the net effect of that? It'll enable producers to make, to access real-time information, both from your animals, your assets, and then use that information to make informed decisions. Let's talk about CAN bus. So probably safe to say that everybody in this building uses CAN bus every day of every week. Any car less than 15 years old, any modern farm machinery has CAN bus. So effectively, what's CAN bus? It was a system designed by the automotive industry to say, rather than large wiring looms in vehicles, if you want to add functionality or devices, you add a module, and you've got a very simple connection system to connect it to the computer, or the ECU, which you'll find in virtually every vehicle now. It's a means, so an engine management system is an ECU, so anything with a modern motor now has got an engine management system in. But what's the other information that's sitting there that's resident that we're not using? Well, if you take the machinery application, you typically have metrics like fuel consumption, speed. You take a modern car to a garage now, there's a plug in the car, they plug in a CAN bus controller, and it tells them your braking pattern for the last month. It tells them when the last service was. So this is information that's resident in our daily lives. How well utilized is it? In industry, quite well. CAN bus is a protocol taken from the automotive industry and deployed, again, for simplicity. But you take the farm situation, what's useful on CAN bus and how easy is it to get from your machinery? Well, the other things that CAN bus do quite commonly on machinery is they have GPS. So for example, if you've got an expensive farm asset and you want to know where it is at any point in time, a GPS output is quite common from machinery. So, you take that information, you put it in a device like an iPad that you can use on a daily basis. You have a map of your farm. You use your finger to draw a geofence, as it's called, around your property. If that vehicle leaves in an unauthorized manner, it gives you a message saying, there goes your $500,000 tractor, for example. That's where that information is useful. So let's get to the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything. This is probably 10, 12 years old as a principle. I would say it is driving more than likely most of, sorry, can I ask somebody for some water? Thanks. Most of development today in technology. So, you look at where do we see the Internet of Things? Whether we realize it or not, it's something we're using every day. Be it consumer and home, smart infrastructure, security and surveillance. The concept is to build a level of functionality into every device we use, and then to make that information available. Thank you. Sorry about that. In the industrial market, information is king. It has been for a long, long time. And a lot of these protocols have been used at a very discrete level in manufacturing. And now, with the advent of the cloud, it's possible for people to run large manufacturing facilities remote, and again, make informed decisions based on deployment of labor, usage of raw materials, et cetera, et cetera. So the concept of the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything is, day-to-day devices that we have. It's connectivity. It's what allows the iPhone to turn on and off the lights in a room. So, what do you need to make that happen? Well, you need a Internet of Things device, which is what these are. And then you need a smart light fitting. So a light fitting that's able to communicate with this. And that's the standard sort of functionality that's being built into product now, almost by stealth. So if we look at smart sensing technology then, let's look at it from an agricultural application. What can it do for us? So smart IDs on sheep. So, well, I know it's not, or I understand it's not legislation yet to have, say, RFID tags on sheep specifically. You know, what this type of device here does for you is allow you to create a sensor that's quite intelligent. It's customizable, you can add functionality in its basic form. And to give you a scale of what that size is, it's that size of a phone now. It'll allow you to track an animal, depending on what sort of added functionality you add on there. You could pick up the respiratory rate of an animal, you could pick up the temperature of an animal, or you could look at behavior from an animal. So, one of the big limiting factors up to, say, probably 2 years ago, is I put a device on an animal. Unfortunately, the animal won't play ball and come back in every 2 days to get its battery charged. So that's where it becomes impractical. So how do I deploy sensing technology or devices that will give me good data and consistently give me good data without having to plug a sheep in? And that's been the advent of the piezoelectric smart sensor. So it's a long name for a pretty old principle, actually. So the real element, in its basic form, a piezoelectric sensor is something that can harvest energy. It's a mechanical lever. Now, it's a mechanical lever at a size that, in most cases, you need a microscope to see it. And the principle being, if I can get movement from something mechanically, then in effect, I've got a micro generator there. So it's, how do I deploy the sensor smart enough that it's, so if I want GPS on a sheep, or a cow, or whatever it be, I'm not allowed to say that word in here, cow, am I? What do I need to actually know? Do I need to know where it is all of the time? No. So you then start on your design of your sensor and you say, okay, to power all the electronics on here is going to take that, 10% of battery power. If I turn everything on and I have up to the second feedback on where the sheep is, I have its temperature every 15 seconds. I can track its respiratory rate every 15 seconds. Then you will be plugging the sheep in at night because that consumes a lot of energy. It's a bit like your phone. You get, maybe a day's charge out of your phone. So the concept of the smart sensor is to say, okay, let's be sensible about how we deploy, and let's be sensible about what information we actually want. So in a typical application, say for the farm, and it's not just the farm industry does something quite similar here as well. It would say, okay, I've got X amount of animals in a paddock. So what am I actually interested in? Am I actually interested in knowing where they are all the time? No, probably not, unless I want to go and look for a specific animal, or unless a specific animal has an issue. So what could an issue be? If I'm tracking its respiratory rate, or I'm tracking its temperature, or its movement, or its behavior. So let's say we have a mobbing type event of animals. We get 20 sheep in the corner of a pen. So can we use the sensory feedback here to give us some intelligent data? So if I see mobbing behavior, I can make a few assumptions based on that. There's an issue with the animals, they're startled, there's a predator. There's quite a lot of information can be taken from that. So what happens with my sensor at that point? Well, and I'll cover it in a later slide. The obvious issues with data and sending data is, to the best of my knowledge, not every farm in the world is Wi-Fi enabled. In fact, probably very few are. So I need to create a communication network that allows me to hop data. So let's say that back corner of the room there's a Wi-Fi point. But it can only pick up from 2 meters away from the Wi-Fi point. And let's imagine for a moment half of you are sheep with sensors on you. So I need to get your information to that receiver over there. So what this technology will allow us to do is for that sensor to recognize when there's one near it. And when there's one near it, it can say, "Hi, how are you? Here's some information that needs to go back. Could you pass that on to the next sensor, please?" And that's been the big change in the design of this type of product. It's actually saying, I need the data, unless I'm in an emergency or an alarm situation, and it basically needs to get back to here. So it literally will sensor hop from one device to another and end up back at a collection point. So regular collectible data about an animal, it might give it to me once a day. If we only need it once every 3 days, then it means this thing can sit in a sleep mode. We can tell it, we can pre-program it and say, I only need to hear from you once a week. So once a week, come up for 20 seconds. On board these devices now, there's quite a lot of development in the solid state memory, so it can actually hold a reasonable amount of data. So I can say, look, once a week, come up, I want 30 seconds. And in that 30 seconds, I want you to acquire the sensor next door and go, here, could you pass that information on, please? And that's the sort of latent intelligence that's now being built into these systems. I guess one of the key things is the common user interface. So we look at the sensors and you look at the sensor market, there's lots of manufacturers of different product. A lot of this technology has come from industry where it's quite expensive in its deployment because it needs to be very robust, very well built, et cetera, et cetera. When we start taking that technology, I don't want to put something half the size of the lectern on an animal, that's not practical. So first thing we got to do is size. And then the second thing we got to do is cost. So if you look in the industrial context of sensors, the issue has always been size and size of a market. A sensor is developed, globally there might be a market for 500,000 or 1 million of a type of sensor at any one point in time. When you start to look at agriculture and, animal behavior, animal tracking, I guess one of the key differentiators is volume, size. I don't know the quantity of sheep that are known to be in Australia, but I can tell you it'll be potentially a lot more sensors than any industrial application by a factor of 10. And in today's manufacturing world, in today's modern manufacturing, what that actually means is, what was a $300 sensor rapidly becomes a $100 sensor on a volume of 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, rapidly becomes a $1 sensor. And that's a combination of improved manufacturing, but volume being the real key thing. So a common user interface. So it's great to have all this technology, but what does it look like? I could bore everyone in the room and we can go into the detail of what these things do. At the end of the day, can it be presented to me in a format that's easy to use, that's simple to understand? And then data analytics. What's data analytics? I collect all this data, what's the point? What do I want to do with the data? How do I deploy the data? And that really is, irrespective of your sensing technology or any of these trends, data I collect, what is it? How good is it? What can I use it for? So, digital farm concept. This is something we've been looking at for, probably a year or more now. And interestingly, when we took a first look at this, and we looked at where the sensor market was at that point, there was some big inhibitors. There were some big inhibitors to saying, so that's DEPI in Hamilton, where we did a restrictive feeding system. So that's it on just a Google Map. This was a boundary we drew around it literally because we were looking at transmitting data from a location here to a location here. And in that time frame, we said, okay, in an ideal world, if we had a Wi-Fi enabled environment, so don't think of Wi-Fi of getting your internet at home. What it really means in our language is how can I cover that space? So if I have a sensor or I have a device within that space, so what are devices? They're weighing scales. They're controlling water, controlling irrigation. It's literally anything under that Internet of Things banner that I want to analyze on my farm or on my property. So we said, okay, let's look at the concept of a Wi-Fi enabled environment. Let's look at mobile or remote vehicle Wi-Fi. So a lot of the developments recently have been around in-vehicle Wi-Fi. So let's say we have a very large property and we can comfortably cover this area with Wi-Fi signals without too much expense. But half my animals are down this part of the property, then it's enabling a vehicle. And that's quite in common use now. So people like the NBN, this super internet that I haven't seen yet, but apparently it's on its way. You look at that. How do these guys connect and what do they use to connect in remote areas? Well, the answer to the question is they actually have a Wi-Fi node, which is a small device now that's actually built into their vehicle. So you come from here, you drive into an area that's blind from Wi-Fi, you can actually now have in your vehicle a switch that lights up 20 meters, 30 meters around your vehicle, up to 50 meters. Stand outside with your iPad and you're on the net. So they're the sort of things that have really emerged very quickly in the last year, 2 years. So ease of data collection, passive and active. Again, we're back to the decision-making process. What can I get that will help me make informed decisions? If you look at this diagram here, in effect, that's an overlay on that. So this is referred to as a kinetic mesh, which is a very fancy term, really, for what I've explained earlier. These are my sensors, be that sensor on a vehicle, a sensor on a dam, a sensor in a tank. And the concept of the kinetic mesh, unlike sort of traditional radio signals where I'm going to rely on, line of sight, I'll send something for here, it'll be received over there. As long as I can see it, I know I've got a signal. If I want to go around the corner, well, I can retransmit over there and it can send it around the corner. The concept of the mesh is the more sensors I add in, the system becomes a better and more stable network. So as I'm adding smart devices, it can cover vast distances very, very easily. Some of the technologies now being used and used in agriculture quite a bit can make that point to that point 20, 30 kilometers. So what are the practical applications here? So a few of the things we've looked at, and I know there's plenty that are looking at this type of technology and how it can be used. So automatic lamb-dam assignment. I want a screen, I want a phone, I want an iPad, I want to look at my paddock and I want to know, where's the dam located for lamb assignment. Identify and track mismothering. Complementary information. Again, with the sensor compilation, we have movement. We can detect things like suckling rates, feeding times, durations. Physical location and historical movement. With any of these sensors and how they commit data, again, historically, you can look at patterns across various areas. What are the movement, what are the movement patterns? Like we discussed earlier, raise alarms. If you're looking at a birthing process, you might want to intensively track a couple of animals. Again, not being from your industry, but my understanding is, that can lead to a lot of deaths in your breeding programs, where maybe animals aren't being monitored, or it's not possible to be everywhere all the time. Again, that's what this sort of product will do. If it's intensive care for a newly born animal, if it's looking at the mother during the birthing process, knowing when it's going to go into labor, if it's in a remote location, and getting an alarm on a simple device like your phone, saying we're tracking a respiratory rate here, we're tracking temperature, we're tracking respiratory rate. Our estimate will be this animal is about to go to labor. Okay, where am I going to find the animal? You know, find my sheep. Off it goes. It physically takes you with the standard device you've got. Feeding patterns, identifying when lambing will occur, and live monitoring. So this here is technology that's now today deployed. So this isn't concept stuff at this point. These are remote tracking devices. These are, say, a system like this would be very commonly used in very large areas. Again, a paddock is absolutely another area that could be used in. So you end up with a hub here. There's a few ways of doing this. You end up with a hub here that talks multiple protocols to multiple devices. And then you have your deployed sensors. So whether that sensor's on like I said, a weighing system, or a level on a silo, or a level in a dam, or it's tracking an animal, then this here becomes your data hub. The means of gathering all that information, and a means of these things sensor hopping back to a point. That's one way of doing it for a very large application. If you look at a more simplified application, you got your Apple and your Android phone here. You know, this sort of device. Here's my sensor node. So the sensor node is, you know, again, my tracking device. If I want to track soil temperature, I want to track atmospheric pressure, I want to know UV radiation. I think if we go along here, we'll see. This is just a snapshot of sensor technology that's now available, now here, and in use. So in this particular instance, temperature, humidity. So you've got a growing environment or a greenhouse, you might want to look at the temperature, you might want to look at the humidity, you might want to look at CO2 levels. Depending on your application, things like methane, air pollutants, presence sensor, luminosity, dust. That's a snapshot. That's a huge list. Soil, water temperature, soil moisture. So quite a few of these are deployed. This is a standalone device. You put it in a remote location. It has a onboard battery. It has a solar cell that sits over the top of that. It's got ground sensors that give you 800 mil, 1.8 and 2.2 meter insertion depths. So you get your soil temperature, you get your moisture. Again, a number of those strategically deployed gives you a pretty good idea for an irrigation strategy. And again, it's set and forget. It takes care of its own power requirements. And if it's struggling with that, it lets you know. Communication. Again, a huge array of communication. The whole idea of this, obviously, is to give it the maximum amount of connectivity anywhere you can. So 3G, GPS, GPRS, a GPS module for tracking, RFID in various forms, and just pure Wi-Fi like you're used to in your own homes. So a custom application. So the way this industry has evolved recently is it's saying, okay, one size does not fit all. So how do we create a system that allows you to have a specific sensor requirement to do a specific function and allow you to build it at a very cost-effective price? It says, okay, first thing we do is we decide what the form factor is. You know, we don't miniaturize something if it doesn't need to be miniaturized. At this point in time, miniaturize means cost. So if it's like our moisture sensor in our paddock, things that we'd be interested in, we say, okay, we'll decide on a physical size and a layer. What do I want? Well, I want the 3 sensors to give me moisture and temperature, say, at 3 different levels in my paddock on a particular point. So we make that selection. Oh, what else is useful? Well, I could pick up UV radiation if I wanted to. So I can actually have a look at how my farmer, what effect UV has. Again, I add that to the sensor system. I then say, right, how am I going to get it to communicate? So what infrastructure have I now got on my farm? Going back to the other slide on communication protocols, what this does is it allows me to make decisions about the cheapest way for me to get the data back. That can be, like we said earlier, a hub. That's obviously a more expensive option. Or you know what? I might just want to walk up to a paddock with an iPad and just catch the data when I'm standing there. That means that's a really cheap thing. Power supply. Again, depending on what selection we've made here, if we're talking a standalone, leave it in a paddock or leave it in a shed or on a silo or in a dam, I'm not so worried about the size and the form factor. I'll keep that cheap. So this has been probably the single biggest restrictor in this system. In an ideal world, I'll pick a battery technology like lithium-ion. I'll deploy that. I don't want to go changing batteries. I don't want to know there's a problem with a battery until I know I got a critical failure with a battery that I might want to go and change it. But in essence, if it's going to be useful, I've got to be able to put it there and forget about it. So at that point, I say, okay, I'll have a battery. I might want a solar cell. I might want the piezoelectric we discussed earlier. As sensors become smaller, that's where we go looking. What does all that lead up to? Your custom device. So it allows you to build specific combinations of sensors in a very cost-effective manner. And the last item, Jason isn't scaling at me yet, so I presume I've got a few minutes. MEMS. What's MEMS? This is the bit about where are we going with sensors. So all the sensors you saw earlier on that were that size and half the size of a phone, this isn't an artist's impression, by the way. So MEMS stands for micro electromechanical. Again, it's taking established and good and sound technologies, reducing, making smaller. These are pictures of actual sensors, and this is scaling size for you. So, what are these sensors? Some of these things are GPS tracking devices. Some of them are gas analyzers. It literally is anything you can think of. Who's using it? Okay. If you want to invest money in technology, give it to the military. That's who's been developing MEMS since 1999. There's always one. Recent developments in this area, and something near and dear to your industry, RFID. Look what Hitachi developed. In case you're wondering, that's the RFID sensor, the little black spot there. So this isn't futuristic, this isn't stuff that's blue sky. This is technology you can buy today. What's the concept of this size? Oh, well, if I want to track something, maybe I'll get it to eat it. That's an RFID sensor. Well, what if I wanted a temperature sensor? Or what if I wanted, any amount of parameters? Ease of deployment, tiny in size. So what's driving most of this? Well, you all probably have one. Who's using MEMS? You all probably have one. Anyone with an iPhone or a Galaxy or any modern PDA, you're using MEMS now. And that's really what has driven the major development in MEMS over the last couple of years. You get on your map, you want to find the conference, you put it in on your phone. How does it do that? It's got a MEMS GPS sensor in there. Your phone, moving it around, when you walk around with your phone, your map turns. How does it do that? It's not using GPS. It's using a motion sensor. Your wearable tech, your Fitbit, when you're running, how does it know how hard you run? It's inertial measurement. MEMS. Are we close to? I'll skip that last one. Last year, conference in the US, led by Thomas Frey from the Da Vinci Institute. Google this, gentleman. It's interesting viewing. His prediction for the next 5 to 10 years, you're already there. You're in the coolest profession on earth, according to Thomas Frey, and the one that's about to see the biggest development in technology. Thank you.
No worries. We've got time for a couple of questions from Shane, for Shane. We've got one down here in the front, Tim.
Hi, Peter Van Rennen from Logan. I'm interested from a sheep monitoring and security point of view, and as we all know, when we pay our phone bills, data is very expensive. Can this be built into a private system that is separate from the telcos?
Absolutely. And in fact, we have a system at DEPI that's independent of the telco. Yes, is the quick answer, and that technology is getting very much cheaper now. So you can have an on-farm Wi-Fi network, which will come to a point, say, in your farmhouse, and then you can decide what you want to put on data after that. You gather it back to your system. You can then go on your home broadband if you wanted to send something out, but you're not paying for it deployed across your farm.
Just the last one down the front here, yep.
Can you get the technology to isolate the virtual paddocks instead of fencing? Like could we get the technology to stop them moving?
Okay, so you say
Question was about virtual fencing.
Okay, so when you say virtual fencing, to actually restrict the movement of an animal? Not something I've considered, but...
Never done a lot of fencing then.
No. Do I look like I've done a lot of fencing?
He hasn't...
Look, yes, the real issue with that is to set a virtual fence and then to track a movement to a fence. So is it possible? Yes. What means would you have to restrict the animal? I mean, you see it with dog collars. They do it with dog collars now. They give the dog a shock. What effect would that have on animal behavior? I don't know. But I certainly know we can draw one of the sensors earlier on showed 2 antennas on a small sensor. So for example, its application was, it uses a geofence. So I've got a paddock and I've got a pen. And let's say I want to do a lambdam assignment. I've got two technologies on there. I've got Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi and I've got Bluetooth. So the concept of that sensor is, I put down the map like the DEPI map I showed. We draw a geofence around the paddock. It's using a low-cost LoRa or Wi-Fi in the distance. As it gets close, it tracks itself close. It turns off one sensor and then turns on Bluetooth because it's faster, it's quicker. I can put an animal in a race and I can do a lambdam assignment or put the animal where I want it. So it's possible, but I just would need to understand more about the behavior to understand what could you do to an animal that's not going to stress an animal to keep it in a fence.